EXCELcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Kuskiski, and today I have two special guests, Evan Premo and Mary Bonhag, who are here to talk today about community-supported chamber music. So welcome, Evan, welcome, Mary. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
Great, it's our pleasure. So let's talk about what does that concept, community-supported chamber music, mean to you, and how does it sort of manifest in the work that you do?
Well, we run in Vermont, where we live, we run a nonprofit organization called Scrag Mountain Music, and we have week-long residencies throughout the year that result in 3 concerts at the end of the weekend and also community engagement during the week. So a lot of what we do is directly relating to our community and giving back to our community.
Yeah, and we care a lot about the place that we live, and so the music that we make there, we want it to be so connected to the place, and that comes in the programming that we bring, but mostly in the way that we try to kind of embrace our community in the ways we think about presenting, in terms of the venues that we choose, the way that we invite our audiences in, whether or not they could afford a pricey ticket. Our motto is "Come as you are, pay what you can," to hope that many people can come.
That's great. So I should also say that you're both musicians, also Michigan alumni.
That's true.
So Evan is a bassist and a composer, and Mary is a vocalist, soprano. And so, but of course, you're also artistic administrators. You created this series, and you're also educators. So when you think about what you just spoke to, which is this idea of creating a very inclusive environment that's rooted in a community, the come as you are, pay what you can model. How does that impact, if you can summarize it, the experience that you're going for when people show up to a concert? I'd imagine it's maybe, in some ways a little bit different than what we might envision as a traditional chamber music environment, but there may be other ways in which it's very similar. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think that we're looking for, from start to finish, an experience that's really welcoming to people familiar to coming to classical music concerts, but then especially welcoming to new audiences. So certainly the payment model and the ways that we speak to our audience during the concerts, the ways that we bring interactive performance elements into the concerts, which is a bit unusual.
We really program the music that we're passionate about, which is a pretty diverse music from all periods of classical music, with an emphasis on contemporary music. So we do the music we're passionate about, and then we find ways to connect our audiences to that music, mostly by expressing our passion for the music through interactive activities or the way that we program a concert, so that we can help our audiences find an entry point from which to view this music that we're so passionate about.
Interesting. So at first glance, when you describe sort of obviously the music and making the musical experience authentic, but also true to the aesthetics that you're going for is paramount in this venture. At the same time, you've got a model that is very inclusive and financially could seem like a big risk to say hey, come, it doesn't matter how much you can contribute, we want to have you as part of this experience. And so I'm curious about how it works. In other words, I think that's a little bit of a counterintuitive model, but you're in your 8th year now, right? And you've seen momentum and growth over that time. So can you talk a little bit about why do you think that particular mix, sort of artistic integrity and authentic programming mixed with a very inclusive financial model, how do you make that work?
I think a lot of it has to do with trust. Our audiences trust us to bring our best presentation forward and to invite our colleagues from around the country who we know are fantastic musicians and will really deliver a great concert. And then we trust them to be generous when they can. And they really are. We say at the concerts, if you can afford a $25 ticket to come to this concert, please put it in the basket as we pass it at the intermission. But we want everyone to be here whether or not you can afford that $25 ticket. So just put in what you can.
And frankly, we didn't know whether it would work when we started. I think that's an important point because sometimes we stick with what we know because we know it's going to work or we think it might, it's worked in the past. And with Scrag, we really we're trying to make the most idealistic model we could think of because why not? Why not just try that? And if it falls flat on its face, then you make an about face or you make small changes or whatever. And we also started on a small enough scale that the financial risk was really low. So people were very skeptical, I would say. And even after we formed a nonprofit, our board was still a little bit skeptical about this idea. But as Evan said, we've started with this philosophy from the beginning, and now we've seen even the contributions increase and the average per person donations at intermission at concerts increase over those 8 years.
Wow.
So it's obviously working, and the community understands how it works, and they come through every single time.
So I'm curious about how you sort of communicate with your audience, because it seems to me that part of the sort of building of trust, as you mentioned, comes from having come to experiences or heard from other people who've been at these concerts and have said, this is really a special thing, you should come and be a part of it. But it's also probably getting to know you, because you live in the communities that you're serving, right?
Right.
So how do you think about communicating the message? You mentioned talking about, at the concert, just inviting people to say, look, if you can give this much, we would ask that you do. Are there other things that you do to help generate support, financial support, but also just to communicate the ethos of Scrag?
I think a lot of it is just being the face of the organization and developing this community, not as a separate fundraising venture, but as a part of our programs. Our concerts are about us sharing the music that we're passionate about, and therefore we're developing this relationship. And it's not just a one-way street too. We ask them questions during concerts sometimes too, so we get to know our audiences and back and forth. So therefore I think it comes very naturally then to feel supported and to feel like we're all a part of a community, even just in the concert. And then, of course, we see the people when we go to the grocery store, and when we go to the coffee shop, and so we're part of the community, and we're visible in that way too. Or we go to the farm, which happens to also be one of our concert venues, to get our food or to play the concert. So it's all wrapped up in who we are and what our community is.
And I think also starting from a place of generosity has always been at the heart of really all the work we do, but especially Scrag, and that I think almost always pays off. If you're really starting from a giving place, you're offering something that you love to people that you care about, even if you don't know them, you still care about them. Then there's a response to that, and we're not interested in being closed off from the audience. We're really interested in sharing this special thing that we're so privileged to get to do all the time.
Can you talk really briefly too? I think you mentioned it already a little bit, but I want to hear a little bit more about the venues and the places, and how the sense of place geographically where you are influences where you perform. Yeah,
it influences where we perform, and I think that it also seeps into the music, because we're rehearsing this music in this place. So we invite our friends in, we live together really for a week, rehearsing all day long, stopping for meals. That we do a lot of the food preparation as well, from food that we bought at the farm that we'll end up performing in. And then, our guests stay at houses of our neighbors, and so it's really a communal experience. So therefore, the rehearsal process kind of infuses our music with the essence of the place. So there's that. And then, we choose our venues based on what feels right as a local community. So we go to a farm or an art gallery, some beautiful local churches that we have.
Town halls.
Town halls,
Libraries.
The local radio station. So we really try to choose our venue, homes sometimes, including our own home, for some rehearsal events that we invite the community into, and so it's all of the place where we live.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so there's also this element that you brought up, which was sort of being audacious and idealistic from the beginning, but implementing on a small scale, so you sort of test it out and ensure sort of, it sounds like you developed organic growth in terms of more, audiences, but also participation in the scope of your concerts. Is that fair to say?
Yes, definitely.
So that's an interesting and a big challenge, I think, for us, right? Because if you have a big idea, it's sometimes hard to scale that down in a way that feels authentic. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. So there's two parts here to this question. One is sort of going along the question of why not. It sounds like you did that in terms of determining where you wanted to go. You're doing this in Vermont. So why Vermont, first of all? So maybe tell us a little bit about that. And then I want to ask a question sort of about how the sort of impetus for this series came about. Maybe it's tied into going to Vermont, but I'd love to hear both.
Yeah.
Well, we were both in the Hudson Valley in New York City. I finished up a master's degree, and Evan was at a fellowship in New York City, finished that up, and we had we had many choices. We had lots of choices, obviously. We could have moved to New York City and freelance like all of our friends were doing, or we could have chosen a different city and moved there and freelanced and started up new connections there. But the more we thought about it, the more we thought, well, we don't really want to live in a city long term. Like, we could go there for a little while and maybe make some connections and be part of that world, but then we'd be always wondering how and when we were going to get out into the woods.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, why not turn that whole assumption on its head and just move to where we want to move to and try to stay connected and try to grow our connections even from a rural place. And that also was, I think, gave us the space and confidence to then really even try out our own venture, because there wasn't much competition for
the kinds of
things
specific things
doing.
we were trying to do. And it was a really beautiful time in our lives because it felt so spacious. We had several concerts with different organizations lined up, but mostly it was just time and big experiment that we were doing. We were just going to go find an inexpensive place to rent in Vermont and start meeting people and start inviting friends to come play music with us. So it's very simple, really. Yeah. And it was an experiment. And at first, we knew it was an experiment, and we would give it some time and just see how it felt and how it was. And then it, not too gradually, became a reality.
I think it was a good fit for us, too. I think Vermont and even central Vermont, where we ended up, was, I think the people there, really all of our musicians who come to visit remark at how open our audiences are and how receptive they are. And that's partly
open-hearted, open ears.
That's partly because we've cultivated that, but we noticed that, I think, right from the get-go, that there was a special quality to the people who were there that was really resonating with what we were offering them. So, I think that was also some serendipity there.
Yeah. Well, so there are many reasons why, thinking about that decision you had to make about where you're going to go, why going to a more urban center would have advantages in the pursuit of a performing arts career, right? So there might be more institutions, and more venues, maybe more players, more money flowing to the arts potentially. You mentioned one sort of potential advantage, right, of ending up where you did, which is that you had a low cost place to go. You could basically test things out and get a sense of the scene with a little bit lower risk. What are some of the other advantages that now in hindsight you experienced by making that shift when you did?
Well, I think there's something really, really electrifying about being in an urban center. There's a lot going on, a lot of influences, and that can be very inspiring and very motivating.
A huge number of artists to be in community with, and
I think
cities.
But I think it also can be, I don't know, build up your anxiety level, for lack of a better way to describe it, and it can be hard sometimes to listen to your own artistic voice amidst all the external pressures that you're feeling and seeing, that person over there doing that cool project and that person, and what do I have to offer, and how am I going to even make that work? So I think personally, removing myself from that whole scene really allowed me to grow as an artist, and it allowed me to really listen deeply to what I had to say. And beyond even what special projects I wanted to do, but even what makes my singing of Messiah unique from the gazillion other sopranos that might love singing Messiah, So even for something really standard. So that's one thing. And then also I think related to that is just being amidst green and the power of being in touch with the earth, which is something that I don't think can be, that's just a very, very powerful thing. We're human beings. We're not meant to just be in buildings all the time. We're meant to be connected with this huge organism that we happen to live on. So those are two main things for me.
That has a powerful impact on our art. And certainly the music that I compose, and I think all the music that we rehearse and interpret as performers as well.
That's great. So I would also just reiterate it. You've kind of already mentioned it, but related to this question, the importance of finding a place where you feel like the environment clicks with you, right? And so I do think there's a pressure based on certain constructs we've created about what we should be doing. That we should be in this kind of environment. We should be aiming for these kinds of goals and these kinds of outcomes. But it sounds like what you have achieved in sort of really pursuing that idealistic but true kind of core compass, even if you didn't know what the outcome would be, has rather than suffering from some of the potential pitfalls, like for example losing touch.
Right.
It sounds like, because you don't just draw from artists who are just based in your locale, you're drawing from artists from all over. So are you finding yourself now becoming a hub or a place that's sort of extending opportunity for others?
For sure.
Yeah. It's actually, it feels really great to be able to offer people opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's again like coming from a generous spirit.
Yeah.
Like it's really, that's really important that we are able to. I mean, at the beginning we didn't pay very well. Now we are paying better, so it's more of a generous thing financially.
But we of course approach the kind of residency model from a place of generosity and making all the meals for our artists and feeding them from local food and. So it is kind of an honor to be able to invite our friends from all over to come.
And word's gotten out. I mean, among our peers.
Yeah.
So like people go back home to Boston or Chicago or New York, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Scrag Mountain Music! We had this amazing time." And even though we're working them really hard, like we're rehearsing really challenging programs usually, so we're in the rehearsal room in our music room working pretty hard.
Somehow still they seem rejuvenated when they leave and express that to us, which means a lot, especially because we are so busy while we're there.
That's great. Well, I think that you can speak to now the infrastructure has maybe developed a little bit, you have more funding and so forth, but you never would have gotten to this point if even at the earliest stages the experience was not imbued with that message and the sort of experience that you're cultivating. It's a great lesson to be learned, because I think when you look at a success story of whatever type, it's easy to identify, they've achieved this level and so that has unlocked certain opportunities. But in fact, it's the kind of a reverse process, right? I'm a really a fan of how you have integrated some of these core values into seemingly every element of what you do in Scrag Mountain Music. So that's great. Really quickly before we run out of time, it would be maybe helpful to also get a snapshot of the other activities that go into your professional lives. Yeah. Because obviously you mentioned briefly, you have multiple different hats that you run or use probably just for Scrag. But what are the other things that make up your sort of portfolio of activities?
Yeah. Well, I play with some other chamber groups. I play with, I'm a founding member of Dakota, which is a group of alumni of Ensemble Connect, which is Carnegie Hall's fellowship for chamber music performance and entrepreneurship and community engagement. And so I think a lot of the ideas and a lot of the network of chamber musicians that we work with come from that experience. But Dakota is also a result of that because we're all alumni of that program. And we do international residencies and residencies at universities to teach the kind of work that we do in terms of community engagement and as well as performance. And so there's that, and I'm a composer, and and so I've always got a different composition that I'm working on, at least one, and then play with some other groups. I play occasionally with the Far Cry in Boston, and do some performances more locally too with orchestras and other chamber music festivals in the region. So it's very full and diverse, but it seems like all Vermonters actually kind of make their livings that way. So in a way, we're not too different from the rest of our community because it's so common for people to have 3-4 jobs and then piece together a life in that way. Our jobs just all happen to be in music.
Yeah, and I'm just doing as much singing as I possibly can, and wherever I can, singing with choral societies and singing a lot of recitals around where we are, but then also a little bit farther afield, and lots of chamber music and lots of contemporary music. Variety of things. Yeah,
all sorts of settings. Well, that's fantastic. Well, I wish we had more time to talk today, but it's been such a pleasure to have a chance to talk with you both about your work, the ethos that underlies it, and the success of Scrag Mountain Music. I think it's a great role model for our students to learn more about. So thanks for taking the time, and we look forward to following all your work in the future.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.